Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. Lots of us know Viola Desmond because she's now on our $10 bill, but not a lot of people know about one of her earliest advocates who helped bring her, whole issue to light, and in many ways is one of the main black civil rights activists in Canadian history that more of us should know about, and yet we don't. And that's what's bothering me today. So today we're going to talk about Carrie Best. Now, Carrie Best was a woman born in New Glasgow in 1903. Like I said, New Glasgow starts to feature pretty prominently in Black Canadian history at this point. And she would grow up to actually become one of Canada's leading civil rights activists. And this is in part because her parents strongly encouraged her to study Black Canadian history and to be proud of her Black Canadian heritage. She was also a sharp mind and had a quick wit. She was apparently writing her earliest poems by the age of 4. And on top of that, she often submitted letters to the editor of various local newspapers around her community and around Nova Scotia by the time she was a teenager. So she definitely had a brain between her ears, and she was not ever afraid to speak her mind and voice her opinions and talk about injustice that she saw in the world. As a result, seeing racism and discrimination all around her, she wanted to, of course, challenge and change this. But unfortunately, at this time, there weren't really a lot of avenues for Black Canadians, especially Black women, during this point in time, which, is the 1930s and 1940s. She considered nursing, but no Canadian schools would accept Black people at this point in time. Additionally, she didn't want to clean up anyone's mess but her own, and really she just could not really settle on anything other than activism, publishing, newspaper, radio, and that's what she gets into. So in December of 1941, several high school girls were removed from the Roseland Theatre in New Glasgow by force. This is not the Viola Desmond story. And Viola Desmond's story does involve the Roseland Theatre, but we'll get to that in her own video, which will be coming up, I forget if it's this week or next week, but it's going to happen. And so these high school girls, Black high school girls, had of course tried to sit in the whites only section of the theater and were forcibly removed. As a result, Carrie Best was outraged, and she tried to call attention to this injustice, and she argued against this both in person to, I think, the mayor and the owner of the theater, and also in print in various letters and to any who would listen. Ultimately, of course, because of racism, it fell on deaf ears. So a few days later, again, not one to be deterred by anything, she and her son staged their own version of the protest. They buy the tickets, they leave the tickets on the counter, they go into the theater, sit in the white-only section, and again have to be forcibly removed by police. She was charged with, violating the peace and a few other very dumb and silly trumped-up charges, but this gives her the avenue to file a lawsuit and begin a legal challenge, which was her main goal. After this, the challenge ultimately failed, and to add insult to injury, she was forced to pay the defendant's costs. Not one to be deterred, again, she decides to start her own newspaper, and this newspaper was called The Clarion, as in the Clarion call to action to bring awareness to the injustice faced by not only Black Nova Scotians, but Black Canadians everywhere. It was actually one of the first newspapers owned by Black Canadians, and it promoted, Black rights, better race relations, and it was actually renamed the Negro Citizen in 1956, when it also began national circulation. A Black-owned newspaper from coast to coast in the 50s, well before, the civil rights movement really taking off in the United States, and arguably also here in Canada. A proud part of our heritage that goes largely unrecognized. And it gets better. So it's while she has the Clarion, and this is before it becomes the Negro Citizen, while having the Clarion is when Viola Desmond, who is, she's having her car fixed and she's from out of town. And so while her car is being fixed as a, enterprising Black woman, she decides, while my car is being fixed, I'm going to go to the movies. So she goes to the movies and tries to buy a ticket for not the balcony section, which is where they kept all the black people and indigenous people, if they were even allowed in theaters. But she says, no, I can pay the extra cent to sit in the front. And then the lady says, no, sorry, we can't sell tickets to you people, right? And so Viola Desmond says, okay, well, bully to this, I'm going in anyway. Leaves the extra penny on the counter, goes and sits down amongst the white people, has to be removed. She's put in jail. She's shocked. She's, mad as hell because she was from out of town, didn't realize that these were the policies. And here comes her ally, Carrie Best, who uses the Clarion to put a national spotlight on Viola Desmond's story. I know we know Viola Desmond, and she's on our $10 bill, and I think that's great. It's wonderful. In many ways, Viola Desmond is kind of like our prototypical Rosa Parks. It's great, and I'm not challenging that. But there is no national awareness of the Viola Desmond story without the advocacy and the work and the campaigning of Carrie Best. I just want people to know about Carrie Best and the role she played in another famous story, and one of the most famous and well-known stories of Black activism in Canada. So another thing that Carrie Best did was that while operating her newspaper, she found that she didn't really like a lot of radio programs. She wanted something more to her liking, and being unable to find it, she created her own. So she wanted something soothing and inspiring. And this is what led her to create her own radio program called The Quiet Corner, which debuted in 1952 with her at the microphone. There wasn't, rock and roll, which was again taking off. Instead, The Quiet Corner mostly played classical and religious music segments. But Best would also entertain fans who would tune in by reading the works of American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and African-American poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. And this show went on for 12 years, just being a quiet, relaxing, soothing radio station for those who wanted and needed something like that on the airwaves. Now, as a result, she would also use it to read out Black poetry and bring attention to, again, that sort of sense of pride that she wanted to instill, not just in herself, but in her family, her friends, her community. And in 1968, she actually was hired by another newspaper to be a weekly contributor for a human rights column. And so this, among many things, gave her another outlet and avenue to speak to the inequality faced not just by Black people, but Indigenous people. She was a pretty significant advocate for their rights as well. Because of this, she wanted to improve living conditions on reserves. She talked about inequality in various communities, but especially in her community of New Glasgow. All of this leads to her, getting more and more recognition, to the point that she is eventually awarded the Order of Canada, which is the highest civilian honor that we have here in Canada. This happened on December 18th, 1974, when the Governor General named her as a member of the Order of Canada, which I think is just the entry level. But either way, she then gets additional awards and honorary doctorates. There's, of course, now a commemorative stamp of her. And really, it's just a testament to, in many ways, our failings as a society to not really recognize, at least not have brought awareness of, a major civil rights leader here in Canada. We always know these footnotes. Some of us know about Richard Pierrepoint because of the War of 1812. Some of us know about Viola Desmond and she's like Canada's Rosa Parks with the whole movie theater thing and being refused to be moved from there. Kicks off, civil rights challenge. We know a few people, but we don't know about someone who's kind of like our version of Martin Luther King or Fred Hampton or Malcolm X. Carrie Best is probably one of the best, pun intended, examples that we have of a major Black civil rights leader who was honored in her time and afterwards. And I just wish more people in Canada knew about her because, as I said, Viola Desmond's story doesn't get nearly as much attention as it does without Carrie Best. And Carrie Best wanted the best for all people, whether they were Black, Indigenous, poor, white, brown. She saw injustice and she wanted to fight to change it. And I wish more of us celebrated and knew about her legacy. And the fact that we don't is what's bothering me today.